Our friend
Mike Pounds.
is back in the news, and he has been unusually active as of late. It's really interesting. I suppose Mother has finally forced him to leave the basement in order to campaign for re-election. But unfortunately for him, he cannot seem to keep his foot out of his mouth. On Monday, Vice President Mike Pence got in a little bit of trouble boasting about the stock market during a recession and pandemic. So now let me read you that tweet. He says, another record broken for NASDAQ today. This economy is coming back under President Trump, and it will keep growing with 4 more years. Economy growing, recession doesn't make any sense. NASDAQ. He's talking about the NASDAQ, though, right? Did any one of you give a rat's ass about the NASDAQ right now? I'm pretty sure regular working people not interested in the NASDAQ. You know why? It's because you're suffering for the pandemic as well as the economic recession as a result of that. While the Republican Party has done pretty much nothing, next to nothing, right? We've got one $1,200 paycheck. I'm sorry, not paycheck, but coronavirus relief check, right? That if you were to really kind of parse it out, and I saw this stat on Twitter, it would equal to somewhere about $7 a day after all of this time. So great help, right? Great help, tremendous. Every other country has been giving at least $1,000 or about $2,000 roughly to every citizen every month. It has been a UBI. And yet, one single payment of $1,200 and some unemployment benefits that Republicans fought tooth and nail against. And that's, of course, why they can't agree on another coronavirus stimulus bill as the pandemic rages with nearly 175,000 dead. Look, I'm not sure how many Benghazis that is, but that's a lot. It's got to be a lot. And yet, nothing. 25 million people face homelessness now. And Mike Pence, our good friend,
Mike Pounds,
is talking about the stock market. Why? It's basically nothing more than a financial Ponzi scheme that is completely and utterly divorced from the real economic conditions in this country. That's what Mike Pence is proud of. He knows nothing about the pain in this country, but he sure got an earful on social media. So let me give you a couple of those comments here. One, did you and Mother see the food lines in Texas today? Miles long, hours waited for noodles and crackers and a bag of beans. Who's benefiting from these NASDAQ numbers? Not the backbone of this country. You're right. Another one says, is that all you guys care about? My God. Have you seen the number of death totals? Perhaps some compassion for the grieving families. You realize that Mike Pence is supposed to be some like Christian, right? That's what he calls himself. No, I'm a Christian. Really? You're not acting like one, because as far as I know, Jesus didn't talk or brag about, the wealth in the temple. I seem to remember him chasing the bankers out of the temple with a freaking whip. As soon as Mike Pence does that, that's the day I'll become a Christian. Okay? So it's never going to happen. Now, another person adds, the stock market is not the economy. I don't know how many times people need to hear that before they understand. I'm assuming a lot more, especially since going back to that old Upton Sinclair quote, people whose paychecks depend on them not understanding will never understand because of that very fact. I know I butchered the shit out of that, but understand that's the general gist of it. Another one says, another one who just doesn't get the stock market does not equal the economy. Millions unemployed don't give a damn about it. Neither do the 170,000 plus dead. The stock market is completely detached from reality. It's the 1920s all over again. You've played too many games with our financial system. And that, of course, is Republicans, as well as some corporate Democrats that have done that too. And another one points out how the administration, or I should say the Federal Reserve under this government, has had to pump in $1.25 trillion to keep the markets up. So basically inflating the markets. And that number, 1.25 trillion, actually it's about double, about 2 trillion. All being put into the stock market. And then, billions of dollars being put towards corporations and the wealthy, and we get a sliver, all while people, of course, starve. That's a problem. But hey, at least the rich people get to keep more of their money, right? Well, what about all the people who are not invested in NASDAQ? According to one person, they can't pay for a roof over their heads or food, and asks what happens if their job doesn't provide health insurance. We got at least 5 million people who have lost their employer-sponsored health insurance as a result of this pandemic. Of course, that makes people afraid to go back to their job, not just because of COVID. But hey, good for NASDAQ. Good for NASDAQ. And again, millions have lost their health insurance. What are the Republicans doing about it? Jack shit. They're not doing anything. And the reason you can point the finger at them is because they're in charge, right? They could do something. They didn't. Mitch McConnell took his ball, went home. They're not going to be back till September, and everyone is left hanging. No unemployment benefits. I think just 18 states have taken up the administration on their executive order, which would give about $400 to people. But you have to call up and beg Donald Trump in order to do so, and enter into a contract with the White House, with Trump, in order to have them pay that money. And so if that's not just a contemptible power play on the point of the White House bypassing Congress, because Congress and the Republicans, the Senate refuses to do anything about unemployment. I mean, that's why people are suffering. And understand, of course, seems to be by design. And even when Republicans, Mitch McConnell decides he wants to deign us with his presence in Congress, they're going to sit there and argue for a couple of weeks. And by then, the death toll is going to be over 200,000, and millions will lose their house, their homes, and will be out in the street in the middle of a pandemic. This is a disaster, and it shows that they do not care about you. They don't. Mike Pence ought to be ashamed of his disastrously stupid flex. I mean, come on, dude. And what else can you call it other than a ridiculous flex? They're pissing on you and calling it rain. That's what this is. Or I guess in Trump's case, they'll call it golden showers. Because, it sounds fancy. They're not going to understand the connotation on that. But at the end of the day, there's nothing golden about it. It's just piss. And it helps no one. No one who actually needs it. So, good job, Mike Pence. Congratulations for that flex. I'm sure you and your donors are especially happy that the NASDAQ is doing fantastic, because you never really cared about the American people. And it shows very, very clearly. We know exactly who you are.